Mucinex, the #1 brand doctors trust.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
7:07. We have a few sunshine delays today. Watch out for that in the Team Hochberg Traffic Center. The update with Jeremy Scott.
Problems on the outbound Kennedy where you're heavy just before Washington with a crash in the 3 right lanes. That will affect the Dan Ryan inbound. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Eastbound the Tri-State Spur Ramp, heavy from Waukegan to the Edens Expressway. If you're traveling on the Kennedy inbound, you're heavy Nagel to Lawrence. And again, Hubbard's Cave into downtown 24 and from O'Hare. Again, outbound your slam pack from the Burn all the way to Washington with a crash in the 3 right lanes. It's 14 minutes out to the junction. Eisenhower inbound 33 in from Route 390, 21 in from Old Stevenson, half hour in from 355. Dan Ryan 18 minutes in climbing from 95th all because of that crash on the outbound Kennedy. And if you're traveling on Lakeshore Drive northbound heavy from Soldier Field to Balbo, that's traffic. I'm Jeremy Scott.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our AM 560 Weather Center this morning. Our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
As you're out and about voting this afternoon, lots of sunshine to take along with you, high 63. Clear skies for tonight, low 48. Tomorrow, mostly sunny and mild, high 65. Partly sunny and mild for Thursday, high 66. I'm Cheryl Golden on AM 560, The Answer.
39 at O'Hare, 42 along Chicago's lakefront. Your next news update is at 7:30, and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by HealthQuest Radio with Dr. David Kobaba. Every Saturday morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Yesterday in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden made his closing argument to, dozens of people.
But we're about honor, integrity, dignity. This is the United States of America. We've got to let them show who we are. We choose hope over fear. We choose unity over division. We choose science over fiction. And we choose truth over lies. Constant lies. So folks.
And then his microphone starts cutting out.
Time to stand up.
Yeah, sad.
Take back this democracy. We can do this.
Sad that a few dozen people that showed up couldn't hear the end of that rhetorical flourish. Meanwhile, at one of his rallies yesterday, this one, North Carolina, this is as succinct a closing argument as you've heard from Trump, and it's not new, but it's the closing argument I think you should be offering.
In 2016, North Carolina voted to fire this corrupt political establishment, and you elected an outsider as president who is finally putting America first. And if I don't sound like a typical Washington politician, it's because I'm not a politician. If I don't always play by the rules of the Washington establishment, it's because I was elected to fight for you, and I fight harder than any president has ever for his people.
Forget comparing Trump rallies to Biden campaign events. I mean, Biden to Mike Pence. Mike Pence has exponentially more people in attendance like he did yesterday in Latrobe as compared to Joe Biden.
And Kamala Harris is so bad that CNN doesn't even use any of her sound bites. Like, they'll use Mike Pence's, they'll use Barack Obama's more than Biden's, but they just will show video of Harris because she's not saying anything new or effective.
And the Trump rallies, those crowds, those massive crowds that show up to these rallies, no matter where he goes, they are important. Because energy and enthusiasm is important, and I lean on pollsters like the gentleman who does the TIP IBD polling, who suggests that enthusiasm advantage that Trump has, if he is within 3 percentage points in his polling, which is national in nature, he thinks Trump wins the electoral count because of that enthusiasm advantage he enjoys. And speaking of polling, since we talked about it earlier in the day, I dug this up. This is remarkable. Just thinking about what it would be today if the state of the race was similar. This is a news article from October 31st, 1988. 1988, excuse me. So 3 decades ago, Bush Dukakis. A poll's eye view of the race. ABC News Washington poll, Bush 52-44. Gallup poll, Bush 53-39. CBS News New York Times poll, Bush 54-41. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that news outlets, even the New York Times, Gallup, the Washington Post, the ABC News, all doing this polling in concert with the news outlets retaining the pollsters to do the polling. It wasn't that long ago where they were actually interested in what the state of play in the race was, rather than trying to drive a narrative and also attack anybody that shows the race sizing up differently, the way that, say, Robert Cahaley at Trafalgar has been attacked in recent days, as we discussed yesterday. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined again by John Nolte. He's editor-at-large at Brietbart, and he's a North Carolinian. So, John, why don't we start in your home state? What's the pulse down there, both for Trump as well as for Tom Tillis, since the Senate is in play?
I think Trump is in better shape than Tillis is, because Tillis just doesn't bring out the same energy that Trump does, and the Democrats are doing a pretty good job of diminishing people's love for Tillis. For example, yesterday I got a mailer, obviously from Democrats, attacking Tillis because he didn't back Trump on immigration. He didn't back Trump on the border wall. So the Democrats are working very hard to diminish enthusiasm for Trump, and I give Trump a much better chance here than Tillis, and I don't think Tillis would have had a chance if Cal Cunningham hadn't blown up his campaign with all this adultery accusations, which are probably true.
I was going to say.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, doesn't that affect Tillis and help Tillis?
The prospect that he's going to be court-martialed after the election, so it's going to be Joe Biden is going to be in prison with Cunningham. I mean, it's what you win in order to be sent away, perhaps. Well, I think we all know that if because Cal Cunningham is a Democrat, nothing's going to happen to him whether he wins or loses. It just doesn't work that way. If he were a Republican, he'd already be in jail. But the polls still show. And you got to take them with a grain of salt, but you still got to take them. The polls still show that things favor Cunningham, and Tillis is such a dry mop that there's just not the same amount of excitement there. And keep in mind, this is an old Democrat state. In 2016, Trump won by almost 4 points, but we lost our Republican governor. Right. We got this idiot Cooper. So this isn't a state where you can count on every Republican voting the same way, or everyone who votes for Trump voting for straight ticket. They just don't do that in this state. And Cooper's probably going to get reelected by a huge margin, even if Trump wins. Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good point, and of course the whole Biden and Cunningham in prison. I'm being hyperbolic, but with North Carolina is one of those states too where something magical might happen today, which is the black vote puts Trump over the top, and maybe the black vote and the Latino vote, minority groups, his percentage of those groups in particular, puts him over the top and delivers states like North Carolina and other swing states in the South. Yeah, I said this in 2016, and I'm thinking the same thing this year. North Carolina is the state to watch. In 2016, the pollsters had North Carolina tied, favoring Hillary by about a point or two. And Trump won it by 4 points, almost 4 points. And when that happened, what I told everyone beforehand, before Election Day, I said, watch North Carolina. If Trump does better in North Carolina, because it's going to be one of the first states where the votes come in, if Trump does better in North Carolina than the polls say,
it tells you that the models were probably wrong and that he's got a good chance. And I think the same thing is true this time. And another state to watch is going to be Georgia, just to see where the actual vote compares to the polls. Also, in North Carolina, Republicans are doing much better on the early vote than they did in 2016. Democrats had a wider lead. Now, we don't know who these Democrats and who these Republicans voted for, but Democrats had a wider lead in the early vote in 2016 than they do now, and Republicans have registered more people. So I'm going to be watching this state very, very closely.
The other thing here that's under-discussed, we've discussed on this show a bit, but, the quality of the campaign matters. Decisions like to do the rallies that Trump has done to rebuild the enthusiasm that he has built going into today. Also, Nick Traynor, who is Trump's campaign director of campaign director of battleground strategy, I should say, in a lot of places across the country, Election Day is going to look like a Trump rally, he said, talking about their get out the vote efforts, their ability to push even low propensity Trump voters to the polls, the point of having some of these rallies in exurban areas to generate more enthusiasm out on the hustings and again, propel people to the polls. That campaign infrastructure, the ground game they had in terms of door knocking and canvassing that's now turned into get out the vote, that matters in states that could be decided by a few thousand votes.
Yeah, this is the first year that I've lived in North Carolina where someone knocked on my door, and it was the Trump people. That's the first year. That's never happened to me here. And this is also, interestingly enough, in 2016, I had a landline. Now I just have a cell phone. In 2016, I probably got called, no exaggeration, a dozen times by pollsters. And this time I haven't heard from a single pollster. In 2016, I heard from no one in the Trump campaign over my phone. This year, I've, again, no exaggeration, easily gotten 25 texts telling me to go vote, reminding me to go vote. So that's anecdotal, obviously, but that's never happened to me before, these three things. So I'm very, I feel better about Trump's chances this year than I did in 2016.
Really?
And obviously Trump won. I'm still worried, very worried. I wouldn't bet my house on it, but those are some factors, some anecdotal factors. And I live in a swing county. Watauga County is a swing county. And that, when someone knocked on my door, that shocked me. And they were all over the neighborhood that day. So we'll see.
And I know there was, North Carolina was one of those states with litigation regarding the administration of his election, of their election, I should say, of its election. So that got settled out by the Supreme Court. And are you concerned at all about fraud or a delay in terms of North Carolina's reporting of its results?
I don't mind a delay if they're going to count all the votes. What I'm concerned about are counties like Mecklenburg, which is Charlotte, them just finding votes. We saw that happen in Minnesota with the Al Franken election. They just keep finding votes, and we all know how they do it. And, of course, Trump's concerned about that. He's very concerned about it in Pennsylvania, where they're allowed to count the vote through Friday, and it doesn't matter when the ballot comes in, as long as it's postmarked today. And, it's all very hinky and very troubling. And the Constitution says today is voting day. So it's fine if you take extra time to count the ballots, because as long as they're received by today, because sometimes it takes a while, especially military ballots.
Right.
You don't want to disenfranchise those guys because they're overseas. But we all know what the Democrats do. We all know how they harvest these ballots, how they cheat, and that in counties like Mecklenburg and cities like Charlotte, these massive urban areas where Republicans have pretty much been forced out and have no control over the levers of government, anything can happen because Democrats run everything. And that's what worries me a lot.
So, John, you don't think we'll know who's going to be the next president tonight?
I have no idea. I think it's certainly possible, and it would be if we learned who was the president tonight, we've been through this before. We didn't know who the president was in 2000. We didn't know who the president was in 2004 until the next day. Even 2016, we didn't really know. So it's not improbable.
Well, hopefully, North Carolina, we will know tonight, and that'll be a leading indicator of a good night, as you suggested was the case in 2016. John Nolte, editor-at-large at Brietbart, Breitbart.com. John, thanks as always for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.